is The Furnace with John Burton.
All right, we are going to talk about the pandemic of dead-end churches. And, we could also call them cul-de-sac churches. I'll bring some definition to that in a moment. But it's a pandemic, everybody. Churches like this are everywhere in America and certainly the Western world that we know it. Everywhere. And I believe that it's a hindrance to revival. Speaking of revival, this is the reason that I talk about the church so often. You got to understand this. It's not just because, we're looking for, issues, with the setup, with the culture of a church, just for the sake of dealing with that and trying to make it a better church experience. No. Not at all. Those of you out there that you're just looking for a better church experience, you are missing it entirely. The reason I deal with church issues so often is because I believe that the church is the governmental force. It's the governmental authority that will give structure. It will give strength. It will facilitate revival. So an outpouring of God. See, there's a lot of misunderstanding out there. There's a lot of people out there that think that the church is a hindrance to revival, and it is. And therefore, we need to eliminate the church and go in a different way. That's wrong. 100% wrong. See, and the enemy knows this. So what the enemy is trying to do is he's trying to mess up the church, which he's done quite successfully. But he's also trying to scatter the people, right? He doesn't want the church in all its glory in action. He doesn't want that. And so he's been successful on two fronts. Number one, on compromising the mission of the church, and number two, frustrating people so much that they abandon the church thinking wrongly that it will lead to revival more quickly and more purely. Wrong. Absolutely wrong. So again, that is why I deal with the issue of the church so often. That's why that my spirit grieves when there are issues in the church. And so we're going to talk about one of those issues today. And again, it's pandemic. This is something that is affecting and infecting, almost all churches possibly. Now understand, I didn't say all, understand there are some amazing churches out there and leaders with phenomenal giftings and abilities and passion and vision and with the right heart, and they're humble, and they're out there, everybody. Some of you that are just so disillusioned, disenchanted, you're not looking hard enough. They are absolutely out there. You got to go find them. But I still stand by my statement that very possibly almost all churches are affected and infected by this idea of the dead-end church or the cul-de-sac church. Okay, what do I mean? What do I mean by this? The dead-end church is the church, and it's actually quite obvious. Don't check out on me. I'm gonna speak to this. I'm gonna go into some detail, but it's the church that is mostly focused on its own survival. The local church mostly focused on its own survival, on its own success. So you'll notice that most of everything that they do centers around that church's ability to survive, to grow, to attract visitors, to become more influential, on and on and on and on. And now before you check out, you need to grab hold of something. In and of itself, the idea of wanting a visitor to come to your church, it's not a bad thing. It's all right. But I've seen the moment it goes beyond that simple desire where, yes, it would be nice if we would get some more people in the church, to an all-out strategy to draw them, to woo them, to sell them, to market them. It's at that point where things get a little shady. Again, listen, I need to make sure I clarify this. I don't believe it's wrong I use the word market. I don't believe it's wrong even to put ads out. I don't believe it's wrong to present your church in a certain way. I don't believe that's wrong. I don't believe it's wrong to, with excellence, present your church, with excellence. And when I say excellence, I mean everything from the way they, keep in the grass mode to their logo design and graphic design and the way that they are. I'm just talking almost, just the almost the frivolous things, but there's nothing wrong with that. It's all good. I think it's fine. But the point that it goes beyond that into our focus, our passion, our drive is to grow numerically. Our passion, our drive is to grow in influence, right? That's why we're here. We want more people here. We want to be the biggest church. We want to grow. We want to develop. We want people in the pews. At that point, that's what I'm talking about. And so you'll notice, because that's the first step to becoming a dead-end church. At that point, you'll notice that most everything that's done is for the sake of growing bigger, right? And that's where we have the problem. I mentioned a cul-de-sac church. I had the idea of a dead-end church, of course. I mean, that was kind of my original idea, that I had this picture in my mind of a cul-de-sac and, in some nice neighborhoods, you just envision, nice homes and kiddos out playing in the yard. And sometimes they'll have little cul-de-sac parties or block parties even, right? And so it's all about the experience, and everybody bring you have a little potluck and bring a main course and bring a dessert and which I love potlucks and I love all that. I'm a big fan. But it's this party atmosphere. It's this let's be happy together atmosphere. It's this let's facilitate this positive vibe kind of thing. It's let's all gather together and and I know I'll get in trouble for this one, but it's almost like let's get together and just be family, right? I'll tell you right now, I believe the church's emphasis on quote unquote being family has compromised the mission of the church in ways that we may never understand. And there are churches all over the place that it's all about family. It's all about being a family style church. It's all about relationships, all about connecting, all about being together, all about that. And again, in and of itself, it's fine, of course, to connect and to be together and all, but it becomes the mission of the church. So we want to create this happy place that people are happy in, and they want to be there, and they want to stay, and we're all going to just hold hands and love one another and be together. And this is the epitome of the church experience. Okay, track with me, folks. You've got to be alert enough and understanding enough to hear me, because again. Don't accuse me of saying that I'm anti-love or that I'm anti-family or that I'm anti-relationship. That's crazy. All of that's important, but it has its place. The purpose of the church is as it's a military. So the way so many churches and these cul-de-sac churches and hey, let's all be together and let's all have a good time and let's all develop stronger bonds of love and togetherness and it's that kind of thing that I believe is a mega hindrance to the mission of the church. You might grow big. You might grow into hundreds. You might grow into thousands. You might grow big with that method, but it is a mega hindrance to the church. Again, a lot of the seeker type churches do this, but listen, it is not only the seeker type churches. Boy, I know that, there are many, spirit-filled, dancing in the aisles kind of churches that are mostly a family style church. I do not believe the family model of church is the purest New Testament model of church. I simply don't believe it is. And so the idea is that churches are trying to be family. Why? Because everybody wants to feel together, feel a part, feel a place. It's all about come here because we'll love you. It becomes very self-serving. Come here because you'll connect, you'll fit in. You're going to fit in here. I was quite bold when I was leading a church, and if asked, I would let people know that there's a strong chance they would not fit in my church. Not because they're not valuable as a person, but because of our focus. They may choose, whoa, baby, this ain't for me. This is not for me. And so we're not going to violate or compromise our call, our mission, for the sake of making somebody feel comfortable in our church. Understand? I'm not saying that we're mean or jerks. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that functionally, they're not going to enjoy it. I wish they would, but because so many people have been indoctrinated to expect a certain low-level, social club love fest kind of thing at church, that's what they're looking for nowadays. And so when they tap into a very missional church that is prayer focused, that is full of the fire of God, people tend not to want to connect. And so you might go to you might get a new job because all your friends work there, and it's like, it's the best job ever. You've got to come work with us. It is amazing. It's so much fun. And then you get the job and you hate the job. You love your friends, but you hate the job. And so you're not gonna stay there because the job is the main thing. The job is the most important thing. You are not there to hang out with your friends. Are you getting this? You're not there to hang out with your friends. You're not getting up every morning and going there to hang out with your friends. That's not the reason. Not at all. Now, it's nice that they're there and you can have some laughs and small talk, but that is not why you're there. You're there to do a job. That's the church. The church is a military. It really is. Absolutely it is. That doesn't mean that it's cold, that it's not a joyful place to be. I'm not saying that at all. But in terms of relationships in a legit church that's focused on mission, that's going to battle against the enemy, that's in training, they're being equipped. The relationships are forged in the foxhole. So, and it changes everything, because you might find yourself hanging out with somebody in that environment that you would never hang out in this family style church, this cul-de-sac church, right? And it changes everything. So the church is a military. So now back to this idea of dead-end churches. I want to try to paint this picture for you, because there's a lot of you that out there right now, you're listening to this and you're like, well, that ain't my church. Now, first of all, I don't want you to become jaded. I want you to be full of love and full of life. I don't want you to start nitpicking about your church. I don't want that. I want you to love your church and your pastor and all that. That's really, really important. You don't want to have the wrong attitude. But this is something where we need to consider on the grand scheme of things, because the church situation in Western culture is really, really messed up. So we need to stop and think about this. But again, let me paint a picture. These types of dead-end churches or cul-de-sac churches, and by the way, a cul-de-sac church, I kind of described it, I guess, but it's just more of this, let's come together, be happy, have fun kind of thing. A dead-end church, very well may have a drive and a passion and a focus and a vision and all that. It might very well even feel cutting edge. It might feel like there's forward progress. You understand what I'm saying? So there's a difference between the two. The cul-de-sac church, come together, let's be family, let's talk about Jesus, let's have our Bible studies, let's have our potlucks, let's enjoy time together, let's learn some nuggets for living every Sunday morning kind of a thing. That's your cul-de-sac church. Dead-end church is a little different. It is very often they'll be driven, and they'll have focus, and they're gonna go for it, and they're all in, and they're passionate. Yet what they're all in on, or the way that they're going about it, is creating a dead-end church. So for example, when I was leading churches, I'm going to share a couple stories. A couple scenarios. First scenario is I've planted two churches, one in Colorado Springs, one in Detroit. And both churches fairly quickly became very vibrant, alive. I mean, worship was amazing. We were full of the fire of God. I mean, there was manifestations of God's presence that were just remarkable, signs and wonders. Amazing. It really, really was. And both places. I mean, deliverance and just so cool. You'd walk in and at that level, a lot of people would walk in and be like, whoa, this is extreme. I don't know. This is a little too much for me. But something in my spirit, this is my own personal life lesson, something in my spirit, I was unsettled in both situations. And because in both of these situations, we had these vibrant ministries. I mean, I'm telling you, I had a ministry school in Detroit. It was amazing. And I mean, I could go on and on and on. I've written a lot of books about the stories, especially in Colorado and all this stuff. But something happened in my spirit that was unsettled because I sensed that it was, and I didn't have this language back then, but we could become a dead-end church. So I felt it was critical to bring us back to center, to where we were going to become, incredibly focused on mission. And when I say mission, our mission was prayer, intercession. It was regional. It was all about the city. It was about all of that. And I mean, I've always been about that. There were 2 prayer movements, one in each city, where we would go to different churches every Friday night and pray in the Spirit for 2 hours. We were in over 100 churches in Colorado Springs, over 70 churches in Detroit. And I came alive more in other people's churches leading prayer than I did in my own church right on a Sunday. And so that was my heart. That was my passion. So we brought it back to center, and we went deep into prayer more than ever. And we prayed, and we contended, and we were on our face, and we were teaching on revival, and we were going hardcore after holiness and all this. And so I knew, without getting into too much detail, there's so much to the stories, but I knew beforehand, listen, that if I made the change, understand we had growing churches. Easily, folks, I believe we could have grown over the next year, 2, 3 years, whatever, to 3, 4, 5, 6, 700 people. Easily. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think I just was there. I've had people tell me that. And I had to make the decision to stop it. I had to make the decision. Knowing that even after the fact, that there would be all sorts of scrutiny and fingers pointed. It's like, look what he just did. But see, my passion was not about having the biggest church in Detroit or Colorado Springs or the most vibrant or the most whatever. That wasn't my passion. My passion was being obedient to God and fulfilling the mission He's given me. And that was to pray. And to gather people around me to pray, to contend, to intercede, to go hardcore after God, to facilitate the fire, to burn night and day, to raise up burning ones. I mean, that was my mandate. That was it. That was the call. And so we had all this other good stuff going on around that, yet all this other good stuff, really good stuff, started to diminish just a little bit that nucleus of prayer, that fusion, that power center of prayer. And that's why my spirit started to grieve. So in both situations, they're different situations. In Colorado Springs specifically, I made the choice to go towards prayer. And I knew, 100% knew, there's a big story behind this. God was speaking to me, big dramatic story. But I knew that we would lose almost everybody in the church. I knew it. So I had to make a decision, and it wasn't easy. And it was, boy, oh boy. There was so many prophetic words over me in that season. It was off the charts. I had to make that decision on my knees in a dark room one day with God hovering over me that, okay, we are basically canceling this growing to 400 or 500 or 600 people kind of thing. We're canceling this happy, vibrant, spirit-filled church, and we are expecting maybe 90% of the people to leave, and we are going to turn it into a furnace of intercession. I made that choice knowing I could choose between 500 or 600 people or maybe 25 people. I'll never forget it. Never forget it. I had the choice. I knew it. I could have 500 or 600 people with a growing church, with a great salary, with maybe a new building. We were looking at new building, possibility to build, and all this kind of stuff. Great staff, great team, felt good worship. We could do that and not fulfill the mandate that God has given me. And honestly, I would have been duped into thinking that was a better model to bring impact to the region than what God was calling me to. It's like certainly more money and more people and more warriors and more, that's certainly going to be better. And God's like, nope. And I had to make the choice. All right, God, I choose the 25. It was a Gideon moment. It's like, let most of them go home. Let the 99% go home. For me, it was about the 90%. Let them go home. And that's what happened. And it was hard beyond anything I could ever explain. My wife in tears, as people started leaving, but I can't even tell you the things that God did. Oh my goodness. Anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. So that's one thing. In Detroit, I had to make the decision to make a turn, and tied to the prayer was also a stronger emphasis on holiness, and I knew I didn't know exactly what was going to happen there, but I knew it was going to cause trouble, and the same thing happened there, and we dropped. I don't know what the percentage was, 80%, something like that. But my heart was not to have this dead-end church that was just all about itself. I wanted to obey God. Something else that I've always done, to emphasize that it's about the region. It's not about the local church. It's about the region. In Scripture, we see the church of the region. That's the reason. That's the church. That's why we gather. It's the regional church. So I'd encourage people in my church all the time. I'd say, you need to go find other churches to go to. Lock in here as your main weekly thing, but we're very finely focused. I'm not going to try to be everything for you all. You need to go to this other church over here. They have an amazing teaching ministry. And over here, this church, and these other churches don't even know I'm sending people to them. My own people. This church over here, they're phenomenal at outreach. And this one over here, man, their children's ministry is awesome, or whatever. And I'd encourage them. You guys need to go and connect in these other churches. I'd also tell other churches, other pastors, leaders, anytime you want to come to my church and recruit anybody from my church to entirely leave my church and go join your church. Do it. You want my best worship leader, my musicians, you want my elders, my leaders, my pastors, you want my most faithful givers. I bet you'd want them. Recruit them. Go for it. You can't steal what I don't own. Go get them. Why? Because my focus was not building my local church. My focus was the region. So dead-end churches are focused on growing the local church, and cul-de-sac churches are focused on growing the local church, where I believe true New Testament churches are focused on expanding the kingdom, advancing the kingdom, specifically in the region that they're in. And again, this is a pandemic. Pastors should be wildly active in the city. That's why it was so important for me to get to these 70 churches in Detroit and 100 churches in Colorado Springs and to pray every Friday night. That's why it was important when I was in Detroit. We canceled everything, almost everything in our church. And for 28 straight nights or something like that? Straight nights, 28 nights, every night. The entire church would go down and drive 45 minutes away to another church that was experiencing a move of God. Why? Well, because I'm more about the region than I am about my own local thing. I would lead the way there. Pastors lead the way. When I was a youth pastor, I would always load the bus up and take kids to revivals out in California, take them to special meetings, take them to prayer meetings all the time. Outside my own church, I'd open, back in the day, I'd open the paper. They had this church paper, this regional Christian paper thing or whatever, and it'd show all the different events coming up in the next week and months. And I'd get them on the calendar, and we'd go all the time. It's about region. Local churches that are not about the region are dead-end churches. They're focused on growing. They're focused on building the next building. They're focused on attracting the visitors. They're focused on keeping the visitors. They're focused on making sure everyone feels connected. They stress out when someone doesn't show up. It's this unbelievable, ridiculous burden. Simply gather together. If you don't grow, you don't grow. It's who cares? If 90% of people leave your church, they leave your church. Who cares? Why? What's the big deal? Go get a job. Get a job somewhere else. Do what God's called you to do. If people come, they come. If they don't, they don't. I'm not saying be lazy. I'm quite the opposite. I'm not saying be unintentional. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying be very militant, be very focused, give everything you have. But it's not about growing your little thing. It's not about just developing your own little group of people. It's all about the region. So again, dead-end churches, cul-de-sac churches focus on the local church growing, where kingdom churches focus on revival in the region. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one. We need a massive reformation in the church, not minor adjustments, massive reformation. And we need pastors that they're not just getting together for nice little weekly or monthly pastors' luncheons or breakfasts. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a strategic surrendering of one's local dream and for the sake of regional advance. That's what we need. All right, leave me some comments. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to The Furnace with John Burton. You can access media, read articles, and partner with the ministry online at burton.tv. And by all means, share this podcast with those who are hungry for revival, reformation, and revolution.